we look at Title I, there is a very large funding stream. It's a $14 billion program every year that goes out across the country. And there's a lot of power in that money, but it's difficult to know the impact of dollars alone on the outcomes of kids and on the development of better schools in our nation. It may be that Title I's influence and its impact has been more around the policy, as you've mentioned, around accountability, around raising standards. What do you think have been the powerful policy pieces attached to Title I that may have more impact than even just the direct dollars that have purchased more teachers in the classroom or something?
So Liz, you're absolutely right. That's, I think, one of the maybe strongest critiques of Title I programs is that it's hard to measure the impact of the dollar. What we do know is that we have accomplished the highest graduation rate that we have had in over, I think, 20 years. And so
just recently we've seen some real growth in that, haven't we?
Yep. So that's a definitely a strong leading indicator that things are on the right track. But what we do know is that only about somewhere between 8 to 12% of funding that goes to districts and schools is actually federal funding, and that includes all the education programs from the U.S. Department of Education, Health and Human Services, and also the Department of Agriculture.
So much more than just the Title I funding.
So much more than just the Title I funding.
And it's just about 10% of what states get.
Yeah, it's approximately about 10% of what you're receiving as far as your whole budget. And so when you think about it, the question becomes, how can you get the biggest bang for the buck, especially when you're leveraging 10% of an overall budget. And it has been done through policy. And so I think that very intentionally there's been a focus on equity of opportunity. And so ensuring that all students have access to highly qualified teachers, that the conversation has changed now to teacher effectiveness, making sure that all students have access to rigorous standards, and making sure that all students are taking an assessment that can then communicate to their teachers, parents, students themselves the performance, and so that interventions can be put in place or supports can be put in place. And so I think the strongest policy levers have been focused on the conversations around equity of opportunity and accountability for schools and for districts, to make sure that they are focused on outcomes for students and that there are no students that are falling through the cracks. And that if so, that there are proper interventions and supports that are being put in place to mitigate that.
So you brought up two really important goals of education from the federal level, which is about equity and equity of opportunity and equal access to services, to highly effective teachers, to highly effective leaders, to good school facilities, to classes that are rigorous and lead to college and to careers. There's also the other piece, which is around excellence, and this one is about keeping those standards high so that all students have to meet those standards. And I think we're really in a remarkable era in that we do have this national understanding now that all kids need to meet that standard, not just some kids. And as you mentioned, NCLB and some of the Title I authorizations before that had called out the power of looking at groups of students, racial and ethnic minority students, low-income students, special education students, students who are learning English as a second language. So that's a pretty remarkable thing. There's also, I think we need to talk about and call out, if we're going to talk about Title I, which is federal funding, the role of the federal government in education, which really changed when Johnson signed into law the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It was a fundamental shift. Many people believe there was a huge step again in that direction with No Child Left Behind, and even today, under the version of Title I that you are overseeing, which is the ESEA flexibility, which has allowed states some waivers. What do you think of the balance of roles with the state, the federal government, the role of districts and schools. How do you see that in today's world?
So, education is inherently a local control matter. So, even with the involvement of the U.S. Department of Education, we inherently see the responsibility as a local issue, and never want to subvert that or take that authority away. I firmly believe that what is in place, though, is to ensure that there are safeguards in place for students who are either marginalized through our education systems, are receiving inequitable treatment in our education systems, or simply purely don't have access to high quality education systems. So there's safeguards in place to ensure what I think is the essence of a civil rights issue for us. Education is the civil rights issue of our time. And so in that regard, I think that's the space that the federal policy occupies, is to ensure that there is a voice for the students who are being marginalized or discriminated against or do not have access, and to ensure that there is a high quality education system available for all students. Outside of that, I believe that all educators would kind of welcome in the vision that has been put forth, even under ESEA flexibility, to ensure high quality standards, college and career ready standards. We want to make sure that all students graduate college and career ready, to make sure that we have strong accountability systems in place that provide supports and interventions to districts and schools, and then also to ensure that we are communicating with teachers and back to teachers and helping them to grow in their profession. And so making sure that we have excellent educators in every single classroom, and doing that through a respectable and comprehensive evaluation system. And so there definitely is, I think, a role for the federal government to play in ensuring that there are safeguards in place for all students for high quality education systems.
It's been such a delight to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
It's fun to have the conversation about Title I's past, about its future, and you do lay out a vision that I hope we can reach.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome.